About this love. About this love. How you guys doing today? You are tuned into About This Love podcast with myself, Dale, and my wife, Sherelle. Say what's up to the peoples.
What's up, peoples?
How you guys doing? Hope you guys had a good week, a good weekend. Today with us, we have a special guest, Reno, my older brother and mentor. And yes, guys, this is my real brother. This ain't no.
This ain't your spiritual brother.
He's also my brother in Christ as well. But he's also, we have the same mother. Let me say that we have the same mother because I don't want nobody to be like, man, you got about 5 brothers. But you know, this is really my natural brother, older brother. I wanted him to share a little bit about his life. I thought it was powerful. While we grew up in the same household, he has me by some years, so he's definitely experienced things in our household before I got there. So I wanted him to kind of share his. When he was younger, he ended up behind bars for about
12 and a half years.
12 and a half years. And afterwards, he got married. Then he ended up getting divorced. And I just wanted him to share a little bit about his life because I felt like his life would help somebody and be very pivotal to somebody. I just know the ups and downs of his life. And I felt like, it was really, really powerful. Really wanted him to share with you guys today. So without further ado, Reno, the floor is yours, man.
Yes. Hello, Radio Land. I'm going to reiterate what my brother was saying. I had him by quite a few years, 10 years to be exact. And in those 10 years of experience, I grew up seeing things that would, revolutionize my mindset and my behaviors. And as a result of it changing my mindset and my behaviors, or molding my mindset and my behaviors, I would later on reflect in my behavior those things that I saw and that I experienced. And so the point of reference is what I'm going to be discussing, the point of reference and how having a good point of reference growing up can it can make you or break you, and literally make you or break you in life.
Yeah,
wow.
Thank you. Yes, so this is actually going to be a 2-part series for our listeners. And for the first part, we asked Reno to kind of give us a background of his life because we feel like context is pivotal. And on part 2, he's actually going to go more into his relationship as an adult man. Like Reno just said, he spent 12 and a half years behind bars. For some of his teens, all of his 20s, he was behind bars. So by the time he actually got out and did get married, he just wasn't equipped to handle the responsibilities that marriage had to offer. And it was because he had spent the majority of his teens and 20s behind bars. So I just wanted to kind of highlight his relationship, but I also wanted to highlight his life to give context. Because sometimes if you don't have context to things, it can kind of make things seem unfair or make things seem like something that it's not. Not to justify a person's actions, but to more so give a look inside. So at what age did you go to prison?
I went in when I was 19. I had just turned 19. I was 32 when I got out.
When you went in, what was your thoughts? Did you feel like your life was over? I mean, just turning 19, a lot of young men are leaving the house, and
yes.
Or going off to college
or military.
Or the military. Yeah. What were your thoughts kind of going in just about your life?
To be honest, the reality hadn't set in yet. The reality didn't set in with me for how my life is just basically, it's ruined. It didn't set in with me until after 2 or 3 years.
Wow. Why that long?
And
out of curiosity, why did it take so long? Normally with some people, once the judge hit the gavel and say the time frame, they just ball away. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, that's a very good question. I believe it goes back to how I grew up. I grew up not being taught the detriment of consequences for the things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't something that was ingrained in me. And I think that's one of the things that needs to be implemented when raising kids. They have to be taught the consequences of certain things that we do. A lot of times that's left out. That's not being too meticulous. There's no such thing as being too meticulous. There's no such thing as being too detailed when it comes to children being taught, not once, not twice, but throughout the years, the danger of consequence as a result, or the reality of consequence, rather, as a result of the decisions that we make in life. And so when I went in, the reality just had not set in just yet. It hadn't set in yet. I was still numb to everything. I was numb to what I had done. I was numb to the consequences. and the numbness didn't leave until after about 2 or 3 years in.
Wow.
And I want to make something perfectly clear. This is not blaming anything on my parents because nobody's perfect. This is not a blame game. This is just about making actual and factual statements and things that have gone on and encounters that can and will leave you molded and or unmolded in life for being able to make better decisions or for making bad decisions when important things are left out of the parenting experience.
What do you feel, was left out that may have led you to do something?
Well, there was a lot of things that were left out that were fundamental to us being able to have a healthy upbringing. But one of the main things, I'll just talk about the violence factor I had experienced growing up.
Yeah.
I remember a time when Dale, you and our sister were not even thought of. And it was just me and mom and dad. And from the onset, I remember from day one, the abuse began. At that time, I couldn't have been no more than about 9 or 10 years old when I saw that. It wasn't even done in a way that would protect me from that. It wasn't like he would, take me by my shoulders and make me go in another room and then deal with the situation. Or it was just a matter of him being angry and him reacting out of anger. That right there, it shook me. And ever since then, there had been that same ongoing pattern. And so when things like that are done in front of you, when violence is taking place in the home and it's done right there in front of you, that's not going to bear any good fruit in your mind.
Yeah.
It's not going to bear any good fruit in your ways.
Yeah.
So he was real subtle about hiding it, keeping it from mom.
You know what's interesting, man? I thought about it over the years, like why I was so angry. But as a kid, you always seem so angry. And it's interesting because as I got older, and I became a teenager, I was always so angry as well. I never equated being around domestic violence and what kind of demonic spirits that may have been able to enter into us because of that environment that was kind of fostering and birthing violence. And because of that, I guess it's only natural that it would give an environment to children that would be angry all the time. Because I remember when I was a kid, I used to fight a lot, man. I mean, I don't even know why I used to fight. I used to fight a lot. I'm not laughing that I used to fight a lot, but it's just funny because it's like, think about it, you're like, man, like, why was I fighting for? Like, I don't even know why I was fighting. I was just like, you said something wrong to me and, you was busting the face. I remember one time, man, I beat a kid up bad, man. I karate kicked him in the ribs, kicked him in the head. Like I remember, I was just angry, man. And he was older than me too. I was probably like 9, 10. He was like 12, 13 years old, man. I beat him up, man. I was just angry.
So obviously the domestic violence was going on in the household, but was there ever any safe spaces where you can go and talk about it, like to an aunt or to an uncle, grandmother, just about what was happening? Because I felt like a few years ago, the Lord revealed to me why I struggled with anger. I mean, I didn't recognize it, but it was because those who, was put in position to really care for me, like they misused and abused it. And so it was just like I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go where anyone would hear me out. And I feel like, aside from like a paid counselor later in life, but at that time nobody was getting to the root of the issue. So did you guys feel like you had anywhere to go to at least talk about what was going on?
I don't think I did. I mean, to me, I didn't think much about it as a kid. Now, I spent a lot of time at my uncles and my aunt's house, which is why every time we go home, I always visit with them because they played a big part in my childhood. And I was always over their house a lot, and my grandparents, which is why I always visit them. But nah, as a kid, I didn't think much about it. Like, I think sometimes people don't understand that if the only thing is your mother, being a prostitute and selling herself for money and pay for the rent, which that's not what my mother was. I'm just using it as an analogy. That's all you know. To you, that's normal. Until you grow up and meet people and realize, oh, what your mom working 9 to 5, or what your mom and dad work and get money that will sell their body. Like as a kid, I didn't realize that it wasn't normal.
Yeah, you get used to the abnormal. You do. You get used to it. That mom. And this is not our mom. Our mom was nothing like that. She was not a prostitute.
Yeah, no. She wasn't.
User
no, she was not.
Or anything like that. But for people who have grown up in that kind of environment where their mom was like that, you do get used to that abnormal thing. But there's always something on the inside that makes you feel like something isn't right.
Yeah.
This is not right. This is not good. Not only because you feel it, and that's just your spirit knowing that, your brain and your spirit communicating with one another, you knowing this, but also because you see normal living in the life of your peers. And your friend's mom has a great job and driving a nice car, living in a nice home, and you see the woman coming and going, your friend's mom coming and going, and she comes home in her scrubs, or she comes home in her work uniform, and it's normal. You see it. But it is a such thing as getting used to the abnormal. And to answer your question, as far as having a place to go to, somebody to talk to vent to confess anything to, two things. I mean, number one, I didn't have that. And number two, I was afraid to speak. I'm pretty sure if a teacher would have came up to me, if a teacher would have just had an intuition, I probably would have said everything is okay, everything is well, out of fear. And sometimes things are kept quiet about it when the kids are asked, because the kids probably feel that nothing genuine is going to be done about the situation. And a lot of times it's not. A lot of times some people, know what's going on, people who can do something about it, and they just don't mess with the situation because they write it off as it being none of their business. So it puts the kid in between a rock and a hard place as he or she grows up seeing what's going on. It really puts the child in between a rock and a hard place. They're in prison. You grow up seeing that you're in prison, and somebody might say, well, that's typical. Every mom and dad fight, but that's not the case. And there are abusive situations that are worse than others. And I'm sorry, but I can't be dismissive about domestic violence. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I never have been, and I never will be, because I experienced it.
Yeah, that's true.
And in some situations I've seen, couples just debate and challenge each other and argue. In that sense, we can't be dismissive about things like this, because every situation is different. And abuse, no matter how great or how small, is a very serious thing. Whether it's verbal, whether it's physical, it's serious, and it ought to be taken seriously at all times.
You know what, man? It's by the grace of God that we both have what we have today. I remember before the new year, I was sitting on the couch talking to the Lord, like, Lord, I have a wife and 3 children and an awesome paying job. And I remember, for me, what was the straw that made me leave home was when there was an incident that happened. Long story short, bullets ended up flying. Nobody was hurt. Nobody was hit. I mean, some car windshields might have been busted or whatever, but nobody was hurt. I think like that same week or the week after, a lady at my job was talking about her neighbor's son had went to Job Corps and then went to, he ended up going to the Navy. Thinking like of my life, it was so random. Because I'm like, what is she talking about? But nevertheless, that was maybe the ear that God wanted me to hear. And I ended up signing up for Job Corps. And I think about 3 weeks to a month, I was gone. I was gone. And I never looked back. Because I remember thinking to myself, like after the incident happened, I was like, man, if I don't get out of here, man, I'm going to end up dead or in jail, yo. That was the result. It was going to happen. I was going to either end up dead, I was going to end up in jail, because I was already starting to be too involved with people who were in the streets. So I was already kind of starting to get deep into the street life. And, I mean, once you do that, I mean, there's only two things you're going to end up happening. Either you're going to kill somebody, or they're going to kill you, or you're going to end up going to jail. That's it. So I was like, you know what, man, I got to get out of here, yo. And I think that when I went to Job Corps, I found God. Like, it was always these Christian Bamas that was around. I was like, man, I'm not trying to hear that crap.
Why they got to be Christian
But
Bamas,
well, at that time in my life, I wasn't really trying to hear that joint. Because, I mean, if you want to be honest, I grew up as a believer, like as a Christian, like in a church, but because of the hypocrisy that I saw growing up, I kind of hated God. Like I didn't want nothing to do with God. I hated God, because I'm like, you know what? If this is what God is, and these Bama's are hypocrites, I'll take my chances and go to hell. You know what I'm saying? But as I got older, the Lord kept introducing people in my life who were like real believers and like who were real genuine, really lived what they preached. So it kind of made me reevaluate this God, this Jesus that I grew up believing in, that I didn't really believe in at all. You know what I'm saying? But that's kind of, as I went to Job Corps, that was kind of the death of the old Dale and the birth of the new Dale, who was, risen in Christ.
Yeah, and because I was the oldest, I had seen way more violence than my brother and sister had seen. Truthfully, by the time y'all came along, Dale, and y'all began to become conscious of the violence and see that it's something that's really, really disturbing, Mom and Dad by that time were basically more or less going downhill as far as all the drama is concerned. Because, I remember my mom had black eyes and busted lips. I remember telling her, Mom, you need to fight. And it's a shame when the kid has to give a parent the advice, I should have said, you need to leave. And that just goes to show how warped I was starting to become. And so, if I wasn't starting to become corrupt in the way I was seeing how to deal with social conflict or domestic conflict, unwarped mindset or mind will say, we need to leave this situation. We got to get out of this. We have to go and set my own future up for more or less the same kind of failure, which is ultimately what would end up happening as I begin to become independent in my own personal life.
Well, I'm not trying to like put you down with like the way that you were thinking, but I'm just like, I think that we have that false expectation on ourselves for ourselves in those situations because you were a child. Like I was telling my son the other day about Martin Luther King, and I went upstairs to go grab something, and then a thought popped in my mind. I said, well, I think I need to talk to him about how he died first before I show him. And it wasn't that they showed anything graphic, but they were just talking about his life and how his life ended. It was nothing graphic. It was like, it was Martin Luther King made for kids, basically. But they mentioned that he was shot. And then I just hear a little voice from the other room, Mommy? I said, oh my God. And you can just see it in his face. He's trying to process it. And he's like, I didn't like that. I didn't like what I just heard. And I said, oh my God, what did you hear? And so I was trying not to freak out because I know what he heard. I heard it too. I mean, I knew what it was. Yeah. But he didn't like the fact that Martin Luther King was shot. So now we have to have the conversation about, and with everything that's going on in the world now, you would think, oh, well, that's just typical. That's normal. That's, kids getting shot, black folks getting shot all the time.
Yeah, but you try to hold on to your children's innocence as long as you can, which is the job of a parent.
Well, yeah. So that was my whole point. Like,
right.
For those who are, as far as the parents, if you're in a situation where you can keep your child, I mean, not that you're trying to keep them from the world, but they can't process or handle it. So I just feel like that's unrealistic. I just think the things that we see as children, whether, we all sit down and watch the movie, whether it's a child movie or adult movie, we have adult conversations around our children that they hear, and they're trying to process that. Like, we don't realize that their mind is going, they're processing things at their age. So that's probably like how your mind processed it. And I was just thinking that probably is what led you to thinking, not today, not again.
Some kids grow up embittered at their mom, embittered at their dad. I think these are things that are not talked about enough.
It's funny because for a long time, the relationship that I had with my natural father actually affected my relationship with the Lord. And one day, one of my mentors in the Lord told me, he was like, man, you gotta forgive your father, man, or you'll never really be able to progress and grow in the Lord because there's too much bitterness and anger there that you have towards your natural father. And for a long time, I didn't want to, what I'm saying? It was a struggle to really, really forgive my father.
I think when it comes to the emotional aspect of what we went through, I started becoming embittered when I went to the penitentiary. That's when a lot of bitterness began to set in. Why? I don't know. And these are statements of fact. And when I was in the penitentiary, in my 30s, all the way into my 30s, it weighed so heavy on my brain, seeing that, experiencing the trauma. I was having nightmares while I was in prison about that past stuff. And when I was in the penitentiary, when I was in there, it was then that I started having thoughts of murdering. And I had been in the Bible, I had been in the Word of God, and so I was fighting in that area of my emotions, and then probably fighting demons because of the nightmares. I came to a point where I realized I had to make a conscious decision to forgive, because forgiveness is for you. It's not always for the other person. Sometimes it can be for the other person. Sometimes people need closure to know that they are forgiven. Sometimes they do. But more important than anything else, it's for you. Forgiveness is for you so that you can heal and you can move on with your life. You can go on with your life. And I ask God to help me. These are things that we don't talk about. It messes you up. I knew I had to let it go. I knew that making parole was my one shot to being able to get my life together. My life was not totally over. Even though I had been extirpated from society for 12 long years, I knew I had one shot to get it right. 12 long years is a lot, especially when you've been incarcerated at, from that age that I was, practically a young adult. And so I wanted to get it right. And I said, Lord, please remove all of the anger, all of the hatred, even that I might have toward you for allowing it. Just take it from me and fill me with your love. Fill me with the love of God. Fill me with your love and help me to just let it go. And she did.
Wow.
And I got it out. That was for me.
I wanted to ask you, people who know you the closest, or people who kind of know your story, they'll kind of ignore. It's kind of like people expect you to be a superhero, like in a sense, like they expect you to be like this husband and great father and great mentor and great man of God, and it's like, but I got trauma that was never dealt with. I got issues I got things that are still stained on my membrane.
Correct.
That I never got over. So what do you like? What would you say to people like that who kind of have that internal trauma and struggle, and they just feel like the world will say, well, that's no excuse for you to do that, or that's no excuse for you to, be a bad father or a bad mother or a bad A, B, C, and D, and kind of ignore the trauma or the pain. Like, what would you say to those people?
Of course, we want perfection out of people. That's only natural, and it's only right to want to see perfection. And so, in desiring to see perfection in people, we want to speak the truth. We want to tell them the truth, even though that might not be living up to that standard of truth. And there's nothing wrong with speaking the truth, but we must always speak the truth in love. And here's a key thing that people need to keep in mind. How in the world can you speak the truth to anybody as regards their imperfections, because you want to see perfection? How can you speak the truth to them if you don't know their whole story? There's no such thing as confronting somebody about detrimental things in a very truthful way if you don't know their whole story.
Yeah.
Because anytime you address them with your so-called truth, you're only addressing what you see and not the underlying things. And if you're not addressing the underlying things, your truth is not their reality. It's only your reality.
Yeah, amen. And I feel like in a lot of sense, we do it to the military as well. A lot of those men and women have seen things that their minds now have to come at home and live like it's normal, but their mind have seen things that they can't unsee.
We know what we expect out of people in theory. A lot of times we expect things out of people, expect people to be perfect in theory. A woman has, in theory, she has what a perfect husband should be. And a man might have a idea of what a wife should be. But what is the reality of the woman you're dating right now? What is the reality of her personality right now? So we all have this idea on how people ought to be.
I like that. I'm going to use that sound.
But what is the reality?
Yeah.
But what is the reality? What is the reality of what they've been through? What is the story? What is the reality? I understand that in theory you want me to be a perfect husband, but in reality, if I never had a point of reference on how to be a husband, I'm not going to know how to be a husband. Not as of yet. Mind you, I might have the potential. The potential is there. Mind you, I might be doing some things right now, but at other times and on other occasions, I'll be doing things wrong. You know what I mean? In theory, you want a child to be perfect in its behavior. But what is the reality? There is no reality for a child to be perfect in its behavior if the child is not being taught correctly. In other words, if the parents are not writing their story correctly, then in reality, they might not be a perfect child.
Absolutely.
Even as an adult, when they become an adult.
I know we didn't get to kind of talk about the tail end, or we just started to talk about the tail end of, your thoughts and feelings when you were getting out of prison. So for those of you listening, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Definitely come back for part 2. And we'll definitely continue on the conversation. And in part 2, we'll get more into
the relationship aspect.
Yeah, the relationship aspect, because on that note, like, you did get married after being incarcerated. So we do want to talk about that love that you found, or that you thought you found after lockup. So definitely tune in for part 2. And I had a great conversation with you guys. We'll be releasing part 2 soon. So definitely look out for that.
So until next time, peace.
Thank you for tuning into today's podcast episode. Be sure to follow and share your thoughts as we continue the conversation on About This Love's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channel. Join the About This Love community on Discord. The ATL podcast episodes can be found on all podcast streaming platforms. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please consider submitting a donation via PayPal or Cash App to keep our podcast going. Click on the link below to find our podcast and social media platforms. Thank you. Until next time, peace.